Hello YouTube, I'm the Foam Witch, and in this video I'm going to show you how I made Gambit's chestplate from the movie Deadpool and Wolverine. Let's do this. To make the base of this chest armour, I used a template I already had from CraftCosplayShop on Etsy. This template can be used as a base for so many things, and I just built up the layers as I went along. I will leave a link for the base template in the description of this video. Starting with the pec area, this piece got cut out of 5mm foam, then flipping the template to cut out an identical piece for the other side. These two pieces then got stuck together down the middle. There are then these long pieces that get cut out and stuck under the pecs, and the top edge of this piece gets cut out at a slight inward bevel so that when it gets stuck to the piece above, it gives a slight angle. And this is what it looked like once the pec area was done. Moving on to the ab area, drawing around this part of the template, again flipping it over to give the other half to give one full piece. Now, this next part was something that I'd never really got right before, and that was trying to carve abs into the foam itself. Every time I tried to do this on projects in the past, I kind of failed miserably, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it another go. So I drew out where I wanted the ab shapes to go. This was different from the ones that were on the base template. Then taking my craft knife to score into the foam just over halfway, you don't want to go all the way through. And this is very much the similar process of when you are scoring in detail lines that you heat up with the heat gun. There's just kind of an extra step to make the abs pop out. Once all the lines have been scored in, you then take the heat gun and heat up the foam. And just to confirm, because I have had people ask in the past, a hairdryer will not be enough for this, you need a high-powered heat gun. Once those scored in lines have started to open and expand, you take the foam piece and you actually bend it backwards, which is hopefully what you can see that I'm doing here. This actually opens those lines up a little bit more and leaves the indent on the other side of the foam. Now this may take multiple passes with the heat gun to get it how you want it. I faffed around with this part for so long. I would reheat the foam, re-stretch it, reheat it again, put it over something curved to push the abs through. But eventually it all came together and I ended up being happy with how the muscles looked. To help the muscles keep their shape, you then go to the back where you've scored the lines in and fill in all those gaps with hot glue. This will stop those lines from closing up and will keep the definition in the front of the piece. This method will take practice. If you don't do it the first time, do not worry, I couldn't get this right for ages, just keep trying. Once all the lines are filled in with hot glue, this is how the back looks. And this is how the front piece looked. That is some crazy detail. The pec pieces then got stuck onto the ab plate, and up to now all of the hot glue I've been using is specifically for foam hot glue sticks from the incredible Tig Supplies. These things are brilliant. Once those two parts were attached, this is how it was looking. I then took these pieces of the templates to make the back part of the chest armour, and they got stuck together to form the back plate. If I was to build this again, I probably wouldn't bother making this part. I would probably just use straps around the side and the back to make it more adjustable, a lot more like the previous older Gambit chest plate that I made that you can see the video of on my channel. But this is just what I decided to go with this time, but yeah, you definitely don't need to do this piece. These parts were then added, which are going to make the bits that go over the shoulders. And this is how it looked once all of those pieces had been attached. The side pieces were then cut out using the same template, and again stuck on using the hot glue. I attached some Velcro to the side pieces and the back to make this wearable, and this is how that attachment looked at the back. Once the base for the armour was complete, it was then time to start building up my own layers, covering the base in cling film and then covering that in masking tape. Using this photo as my main reference, I then went and drew on all the details by hand. And this is probably what most people have been waiting for. I am giving away the parts of the templates that I've drawn myself for free in the description of this video. Just keep in mind that these parts of the templates that I've drawn have been specifically designed to go on top of the chest plate from CraftCosplayShop. If you do use your own base template, you might need to move the pieces around or, I don't know, cut them to shape or whatever. As always, I've only drawn one half of the design. This is because the pieces get flipped over, so you only have to print them out once. Now it was time to start building up that detail, starting with this part of the template for the neck area. Flipping the template to cut this out in one large section, this gets stuck just above the pecs and it flips over the shoulders. And it should look a little something like this. Then taking this part of the template and cutting this twice out of 3mm foam. Most of the detail pieces that I'm adding now are made out of 3mm foam, apart from the middle detail piece and 2 of the side pieces, but I'll explain that when I get to them. These 2 pieces get stuck in this area on the piece that was just added. Moving on to this middle detail piece, and this was cut out of 5mm foam. The edges were rounded off with the Dremel and then it was stuck in between the last 2 parts that were added. Moving on to this section cut out of 3mm foam, this is another detail that goes on the neck. This part has some detail lines on it, so to add these I burnt them in using my Dremel Versatip. If you don't have one of these or you don't have a soldering iron, you can add these by scoring the lines into the foam and heating up with the heat gun. This part was then stuck on at the top of the neck area. And this is how it looked once the layers for the neck area had been added. It was then time to add the layers for the ab area. I have broken these parts down on the template, so just make sure you're following the correct order. This part, cut out of 3mm foam, gets stuck just under the neck area detail. Now I did do something that I don't normally do anymore, and I did use contact adhesive to stick these on. The reason for this being that these parts kind of needed stretching and forming over the muscles on the base plate. So sticking these on with contact adhesive gave me a little bit more time to make sure that they were in the right place and stretched properly. I really try to avoid using contact adhesive where I can because it does make me very ill, but sometimes needs must. 2 of these pieces then got cut out and these get stuck on the sides, leaving a thin gap between the 2 layers just to add a little bit of detail. Then taking this part of the template, drawing around the first half, flipping it to give the second half to give 1 full piece for the centre of the abs. Then sticking it down in this area, again leaving a little bit of gap between the top part so it adds more detail. This part of the template is then used to make the lowest layer. Sticking this on at the bottom of the abs, there should still be a gap for you to add what I'm going to call the belt area around the edge. This is how it was looking once all those pieces had been added. This part of the template was then taken to add the details for the sides. This was cut out of very thin 1mm foam to add some dimension. This is how it was looking once all of the layers on the abs had been added. It was then time to add the final layer of detail, which is what I'm going to call the belt part. This is going to be the silver detail piece that runs around the bottom edge. This piece also has a detail line added to it, and instead of using my Dremel this time, I scored it in with the craft knife and heated it up with the heat gun. This is to show you that this is another method you can use to do this. Again, once the line had been scored in, it gets heated up with the heat gun, which expands the line, adding that detail perfectly. This piece then got stuck around the whole bottom edge. I kind of forgot to say at the start, but when I was using the template for the base, it doesn't have this bottom kind of square shape. I cut that out of the paper template before I cut it out of foam, so you're going to have to do the same. Or you could make the base plate as normal, stick this piece on and then trim the excess away once it was stuck on. It's your decision. Those very thin 1mm side pieces do have some line details on them, so I scored these in with my Dremel. Here is a closer look at those detail lines once they'd all been scored into the foam. And this is how the chest plate was looking once all of those detail layers had been added. The last bit of detail that needed adding were the lines on the neck area. Going back to the reference photo I used before, I just drew these on to the point where I thought they looked right. Then, once again, I took my Dremel Versatip and I scored these lines into the foam. And this is how it looked once all of those lines had been scored in. To tidy this up before painting, I took the Dremel and rounded off all the edges that I'd not previously done. This is how the chest plate looked once everything had been tidied up and it was ready to seal and paint. To seal the foam before painting, you know what I'm going to say if you watch all of my videos, I use black flexi paint from Tigers Supplies. This is my go-to sealer, it is great. This gets brushed on by hand and I think in the end I used about 4 layers. Once the flexi paint had been left overnight to completely dry, it was then time to start painting. When I was looking for paints for this project, I found these two colours which I think are perfect. I started with the burgundy pink colour. As you can see here, the coverage isn't great, so it did take multiple layers to get this to not look patchy. This was after one layer of paint. You can see it's really patchy. I probably should have painted it a different base colour than black, but I like to make things hard for myself. This was after about 4 layers of paint, and this was after I'd completely lost the will to live, and I think this was up to about 8 to 10 layers. When I could take absolutely no more of the pink paint, I was happy with it. I moved on to painting the silver parts. For these parts, I used silver Vallejo airbrush paint, but I just brush it on by hand. This is how it looked once the silver parts had been painted. I then painted the side details using the purple paint. I don't really know why, but the coverage of this paint seemed a lot better, so it only took about 5 layers to get even coverage. This was after 1 layer, and this was after 5 layers. That is a much more reasonable number. I then wanted to go back and add some definition to the muscle area, so I took some blue paint and I just dry brushed this on. If I was to do this again, I'd probably use a different shade of paint for this, but it seemed to work alright. Once the shading had been finished, the Gambit chestplate was complete. Shockingly, I was actually quite happy with how this turned out. If you are still watching this video, I want to give you a massive, huge thank you. If you've enjoyed watching this, if you could give it a thumbs up like, that would be awesome. And if you haven't already subscribed to my channel and would like to do so now, that would also be incredible. The templates for the parts of this build that I designed myself are available for free in the description of this video. However, if you would like to support the content that I make, I do have a Ko-fi page set up for donations. Nothing is ever expected, but everything is so appreciated. I really do hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you make some awesome Gambit chestplates for yourself. All I've got left to say is, I'll see you next time.